Hey, a quick note from the editor here. The rest of the video will not be done by me, but by Red, who mainly led the development of the Balkan. Also, due to the length of the video, I added chapter marks in YouTube here, so you can jump to the parts of the video that interest you. Now without further ado.
April 9th, the row of the Gryphon team decided to hold a dev stream in order to showcase you all our Balkans. However, due to technical difficulties and some issues with the multiplayer, to re-record it all, to give you all a rundown once more about all the different mechanics, all the different features. And yeah, some parts are still a bit rough, but in general this is meant for all the people that have been asking us if we could upload the stream, because they were not able to attend it, and we were just not happy with uploading the stream itself, so we are going to re-record it all. Most notable change would be that we got two different Serbias and that the Ottoman Empire still has its pre-First Balkan War borders. This came to be due to the 1883 Timok Rebellion and its consequences. So the rebellion itself, just like IRL, crumbled under the Royal Serbian forces. However, in our timeline, their leader, Nikola Pašić, was able to flee into exile, and in exile in Russia, he got the chance to return to Serbia with Russian funding and Russian support, because the Russian Empire believed that if they could fund his uprising and that if they could fund his unrest, they would be able to use this as an advantage to then establish a pro-Russian monarchy onto the Serbian throne, as Serbia by the time was still ruled by the pro-Austrian Obrenović dynasty. However, Pašić returned to Serbia and he was able to form a secret army in the underground, and then he started by rising up in the south. He started a Serbian civil war. However, the Russian goal to establish this monarchy within the civil war or during the civil war was never realized, because following the pleas of the king Alexander. However, this ambition could never be realized due to the pleas of the northern Serbian king. However, this plan could never be realized due to the pleas of the Serbian king, who asked the Austrians to intervene on his side. This intervention then came to be, and the Austrians were able to seize Belgrade and the surrounding territories, but they did not stop Pašić from proclaiming the Republic of Serbia in 1885, and to prevent war, Germany then called for the Berlin Conference, in which Austria and Russia, who had previously planned to start a war over this Serbian conflict, were brought to their minds, and they were able to find a democratic solution, which then foresaw Serbia to be split within, according to the Civil War borders. And the north, as you are able to see right here, is currently a puppet of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, while the south, as indicated by this guarantee, is within the Russian sphere of influence. The plan to establish the monarchy, however, failed, not only due to the Austrian intervention, however also due to the distance the south kept in the first 2 years to Russia, because they were angry towards them, they were pissed off at them, because they felt betrayed by Russia giving up the north with the most important city. However, later on, due to their own shortcomings economically and also militarily, they amended their schism and they returned into the Russian sphere. However, the monarchy was never re-established due to all of that. Let's start with the most important one. The Ottoman Empire. As it has been existing for quite some time now and has always been the sick man of the Bosporus, they have had quite a rough time, even though they were able to hold on to the Romanian parts of their empire. So, first things first, they are led by Mehmed VI, and they are currently led by the Social Liberal Party. They are a constitutional monarchy, and their national spirits are as follows. So they got the Baghdad Railway Construction Committee, which is a German investment-based organization that focuses on expanding the Ottoman railway network. They got the Balkan powder keg, which just indicates that this entire area right here is far from being stable. We got the Rising Star, because due to foreign investments and due to foreign aid in modernization, the Ottoman economy is currently on a high rise. We got the Fractured Army, which indicates that political schism within the army and overall a lack of modernization are keeping the Ottoman army at bay. The army is very ineffective, it is currently not in a good state, and it is far from being feared as it once was. And the last idea, and probably also the most important one, showcases the influence of foreign investors, because the Ottoman Empire is not independent, economically at least, because several institutions, not only the German-led Zollverein, but also the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, have a say in Ottoman domestic affairs, especially when it comes to spending money. So all of these values you see there are according to the influence of either the Zollverein or the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, or OPDA, and the Ottomans also have to share some of their industry with their debtors that they owe money to. And all of this is indicated by this decision category right here, which shows you that the Ottomans are currently 200 million in debt. The Zollverein influence lies at 22% and the OPDA influence lies at 78%. Below that you see how much of these 78% is made up by which nation. So we got, for example, the French Republic, which has 31% of influence within the Ottoman Public Debt Administration. Below this we have several decisions that allow you to invest in certain aspects of your economy. For example, you can repay them, which will decrease your debt by 30 million, but you can also increase railway funds, which will then decrease consumer goods by 20% and will increase railway construction speed by 30%. The minus 20% are actually very important because the national spirit gives you 50% of consumer goods, which renders your industry almost entirely useless because you have to have 95% on civilian consumer goods. The last decision up here can be taken when you have 20 army experience and 30 political power at your disposal, which will then allow you to improve your army. As you can see, it will modify the fractured army by a bit. And this is especially useful during the Balkan War, as you will then gain the sufficient amount of army experience in order to fund this improvement. Their focus tree, on the other hand, is relatively small and relatively simple, but at the same time it's only their starting tree, so it does not have to be too fancy. So the main part, or the top part, until the Sultan's decision right here, and the defend our land right here, is basically the Ottoman starting tree. They have to find their place in the world. They have to keep on, they need to manage their dire economic situation, their dire domestic situation. For example, this focus right here will allow you to renegotiate your debt with the British, which could then increase the OPDA influence. As you also see it right here, the United Kingdom will gain increased OPDA influence, which will then raise the value of influence they have in total. You get a Prussian German field marshal through this focus, for example, and it's just to be prepared for what's to come. Down here, however, this is the economic recovery path. So what will happen during early 1920 is that the German-led Zollverein will crash due to a investment crisis in Russia. And of course this also backfires for the Ottomans, because they are closely aligned to the European powers and their economies. So if the European economy fails, the Ottomans will fail as well. And they have some focuses right here to improve their situation, to improve the negative effects. And as you can see, most of them also influence the mechanic I just showcased. The last tree down on the right here is the war tree that will unlock once the Balkan War has started. And they got some very interesting stuff, for example, to deploy experimental gas weapons. A nice bonus right here. Currently it is not showcasing the idea modification, however it will modify the idea. And all in all, it is in order to improve the Ottoman situation during the Balkan War and to maybe even be able to win this war. As for generals, if I'm just gonna grab 4 divisions right here, those are all the generals. Nothing too crazy, a few faces you will most likely recognize. For example, Atatürk is here, and all in all they start with 3 field marshals. They will gain a 4th one, as I just mentioned, through the focus where they gain the German one. But yeah, that's their starting situation. They got around 50 divisions. And one last thing to the Ottomans is this tiny thing right here. It is a puppet of the Ottoman Empire. It is the Cretan state, was established after the Greco-Turkish War of 1897. It is technically almost independent. There is some infighting going around. They don't really respond well to Ottoman rule. They got the legacy of the Cretan revolt spirit right here, and they are basically independent but are unable to unify with Greece because that would cause war between the two nations, and Greece does not want that. But that's been it for the sick man on the Bosporus. For our next nation, we got the Kingdom of Serbia. Be cautious about that. Really dangerous, really racist towards Serbs indeed. However, the kingdom itself is still led by Alexander I. He is from the Obrenovic dynasty, which ruled the Kingdom of Serbia up until the coup of the Black Hand, where he and his wife were murdered. However, this did not happen in our universe due to the split of Serbia. And they are an autocratic royalist regime because they have little to no free space to work with. They really need to get their power together. Most parties are banned, so opposition is not really a thing there, especially in the winter of 1886, when the people began to rebel against the monarchy due to them having being in a bad economic situation, having too little to live. They really had to crack down. The Austrians came to their help. A lot of people died in Belgrade on that day, so it is an autocratic regime indeed. However, they also, of course, antagonize the South and have been doing everything to their power to weaken this state, which they deem to be unrighteous, because, of course, they see themselves as the only true Serbian state. They got the Austrian economic dominance national spirit, which gives them in total 4 factories. So on their own they got 3 factories, but this spirit gives them additional 4 factories. Some factory output, some construction speed, the basic stuff. This one, the advisors from Austria give them some army buffs, especially attack bonus against the south. They are, of course, the monarchy in exile, because they don't rule over the full Serbian lands. And last thing is the socialist underground, which we will have a closer look at later. However, there is a big problem with the Young Serbian Socialist Revolutionary Committee, which is a paramilitary organization seeking to undermine the king's total power. This is further indicated by this decision category, the March on the Great Morava River. And here are some decisions to improve your military position. For example, you can recruit the elderly, which gives you some additional manpower to work with, you can sabotage the south, you can recruit deserters of the south, and you can request additional Austrian industrial equipment. However, you gotta keep a close eye on this one, because every 30 days the Young Serbia Revolutionary Committee will gain additional influence. And once their influence reaches 30%, they will be able to coup you. And to prevent that, you can take this decision, which will then prevent them from couping you. So as long as this decision is active, and it's active for 60 days and will immediately be re-available afterwards, you are safe. However, if you don't keep a close eye on that, and if you're getting couped, you will die, you will be overthrown by the socialists, and then the South will take the opportunity to take the North, which is obviously very racist towards Serbians, because we, in the Row of the Gryphon Dev Team, hate Serbians. For the focus tree, it's rather small when compared to the other Balkan nations. However, they are only meant to bridge the first 1.5 years. Afterwards, they will engage in the Balkan War, they will backstab the South, and if they don't manage to kill the South within 90 days, they will die due to internal instability. They got some nice focuses. For example, this focus right here will give you an improved socialist underground, but it will increase the influence by 10%, while this one will decrease it by 5%. They got this very nice John Wick inspired focus, which will also decrease the Young Serbia influence by 3%, or they got this focus right here, which is basically to improve their military, and then most importantly, we got a close cooperation with the Austrians, also indicated by this arrival in every hand focus, which will actually improve a decision, because now if you take the purchase Austrian rifles decision, you will gain an additional 100 units of infantry equipment. So we really thought about making things a bit more complicated, a bit more mechanic heavy. However, we think it's very enjoyable. This focus probably also very important, because if you take this focus, you will gain 2 additional units. However, once you intervene against the South, there will be a 50% chance of you dying, so you really need to make a gamble right here. Yeah, basically that's been it for the north of Serbia. The next nation we will have a look at is probably the nation Crete, which is down here to the south. So the next nation to the south of the Ottoman Empire is the Kingdom of Greece, and with them trying to regain their lands, especially Crete, but also the states to the north, which have been taken from them or which are ethnically Greece. However, they are still led by King George I. In real life, he was assassinated in 1913. However, that did not happen in our timeline, so he is still around. He is a king loved by his fellow countrymen. He is eager, however, to take back what's rightfully Greek in his opinion, in his eyes. And to start things off, his national spirits are as follows. He got the Hellenic economic depression, because the Greek industry is not really going that strong. They are depending on foreign capital. They have been through several economic recessions, they've been through several depressions, and they have quite recently been forced to declare public insolvency due to their industry failing them. Then we got the failures of the Hellenic army, which is tied into their past failures. For example, during the Ottoman-Greek War of 1897, they lost quite heavily to the Ottomans that outnumbered them, and in that case also outskilled them. It is a negative army buff. Then we get the British Naval Supervision, which is a buff to the naval production. Just symbolizes the cooperation between the two nations. We got foreign economic dependency. This is quite similar to the Ottoman situation, because Greece is in debt to France and Britain most prominently. And we got the linguistic divide, because in Greece at that time, 2 different dialects of Greek were spoken. looking at their decision mechanic, they got a investment mechanic where they gain investment opportunities based on their domestic industry. So as it stands now, you gain 4 investment opportunities per month. Every 40 days, this mission will tick down once. And as you can see, from civilian factories they gain 3, and from national spirits and modifiers they gain 1, which is done by this spirit right here. As you can see, we will gain +1 investment opportunity per month. Additionally, they are able to spend these investment opportunities. So once they have like 20, they are 20 or 30, they are able to spend it. For example, for railways, for a civilian factory, or for a military factory. But they are also able to use it in decisions that will be unlocked later on. For example, if you complete this focus right here, you will unlock the settle the language question decision, which will cost 60 investments, and it will get rid of the national spirit I showcased earlier. But as we were currently speaking of the focus tree, their focus tree is also quite sizable. They got a starting section right at the top here. This will increase coal production, for example. I already talked about this. They will gain some army buffs, they will gain some French advisors if France is willing to give them. They will gain some infantry equipment. They will get some small buffs to their negative army modifier. And then down here we got the economic recovery part with this very important focus right here, because if you take this focus, every negative buff that you will gain from the economic crisis that I already talked about will decrease by a certain amount once you take one of the decisions I showcased earlier. You also got this focus right here. This will unlock additional decisions that I will showcase in just a bit, because you will unlock the DDE, which was founded by Ionios Metaxas. You probably know him, and that will give you some additional way to spend your political power, to spend your resources. Down to the right here, we got the war tree, which will then deal with the Balkan War, as we already observed it in the Ottoman Empire. That is just it just contains some improvements to the general situation, to the army. This, for example, will totally remove the debuffs from the Hellenic army and will instead replace it with a new national spirit that will now buff you. Additionally, Greece gains some decisions before the Balkan War in order to further destabilize the Ottoman Empire, and those decisions are unlocked after taking the freedom or death focus, which you can see here. I used commands in order to reach it. The tooltip says unlocks decisions to organize Greek resistance within the Ottoman controlled regions, and those decisions look like this. So you're able to recruit militia divisions in the following states that are listed right here, and depending on the size of the state, you're able to raise either 3 or 1 militia unit. And how this mechanic works is after the war starts, you will be able to, obviously, you will be able to march onto Ottoman territory, and whenever you take one of the states that you previously raised militias in, those militias will be spawned on your side. So it's a kind of relatively strategic mechanic where you have to plan out which states to raise militias in, so you focus on taking these states within the war in order to reinforce your own army, as the Greek army is not that big at the start of the game, and also a bit lackluster when it comes to the division composition. The next nation on our list would be the Tsardom of Bulgaria, which at this point is still being ruled by Ferdinand I. And their starting national spirits are the legacy of San Stefano, which originates in the peace deal after the Russo-Turkish War, the Prussia of the Balkans, based on a quote by Otto von Bismarck, which is a small army buff, the agricultural dependent society, because Bulgaria has not yet industrialized and still relies on a relatively outdated system of agrarianism, and the Bulgarian political schism, which will also tie into the Bulgarian mechanic, because as all the other nations previously, also Bulgaria has a political mechanic that is made up from a factionalism system. And lastly, the Bulgarian political schism, which is also connected to Bulgaria's domestic political mechanic, because just like all the other Balkan nations, they also have a custom decision mechanic, which looks like this. We have different factions that each of them influence a different value within the national spirit I just showed you. So for example, we got the socialists that influence factory output, or we got the agrarians that influence consumer goods. And each of them has a strength and support value. And if the strength value exceeds the support value, you will have a negative effect. If the strength value, however, is lower than the support value, for example, as it is with the liberals, you will get a buff. And as you can see on the spirit, the consumer goods factories is currently negative, as well as the factory output, so both modifiers are negative for the player, and that's because the socialists have a higher strength value than their support value. Same applies for the agrarians, however all the other three factions have a lower strength value than the support value, so their buffs are positive, and as we can see here, conservatives, for example, influence stability, and the stability modifier is indeed positive. The next thing is their national focus tree, which looks like this. The structure is the same, even though their tree is slightly larger due to some mutually exclusive sections. We start off with a starting section that spreads around here, stops with the Expand the Ruse Arsenal, which gives you some military modifiers. You also got a foreign politics section that later determines what kind of aid you will get during the Balkan War. For example, if you choose the Western aligned Radoslavov, he will actually allow you to call in the French Foreign Legion, whereas the Russian aligned foreign minister will allow you to ask Russia for some guns. You also get to deal with the VMRO, which is a Macedonian revolutionary organization that also plans on striking the Ottomans in order to give Bulgaria the control over Macedonia. So you will have to rely on them as well. They also, of course, got their recovery section from the Zol crash, even though Bulgaria is not as tied into the European economics as the other Balkan nations, so their debuff is not as big, but they still need a recovery section. Another important thing is that some of these focuses also influence the political mechanic I just showed you. So, for example, this focus will increase nationalist strength and will decrease the socialist support, while this focus right here will increase conservative strength and will increase the nationalist strength. The Bulgarian political situation, however, is also quite troublesome, as Bulgaria at this time was plagued with terrorism, and in the early game you will have several events about that. The elections of 1920 will be delayed to 1921 due to the unrest within Bulgaria, so the situation is not as stable, but still they are the strongest nation that will intervene in the Balkan War, besides the Ottomans, of course. So they are probably also the most important nation. And for the sake of showcasing Bulgaria's decisions, I just unlocked some focuses. I unlocked the French Foreign Legion focus and the Favor VMRO Loyalists focus. All of them unlock different decisions, so if we now go into the decision tab, you will see we got the option to enlist VMRO partisans. We are able to exploit Ottoman weak spots. The Slay the Wolf decision is actually a one-time only decision that you unlock after taking this focus right here. It is a relatively strong buff against the Ottoman army, and we also got the Prolonged Allegiance Treaty decision, which is important when you pick the French Foreign Legion, because then you will get a special division, but you will only keep that for around 60 days. After 60 days, this division will vanish, and you will have to take this decision right here in order for them to stay longer, but that is about it for the Bulgarian mechanics. Lastly, as for the Republic of Serbia, their content is relatively racist towards Serbs, because we actually hate Serbians. However, they are currently ruled by Nikola Pašić, who is the leader of the People's Radical Party that also won the Serbian Civil War. And their national spirits are the soaring eagle, as their economy has actually improved over the recent decades. So they have managed to become fairly industrialized for their size and also for their situation. They got the legacy of the Slavic Legion, and the Slavic Legion was a Russian division that was deployed during the Serbian Civil War with the goal of establishing a pro-Russian monarchy, which failed. However, several of their officers remained in Serbia afterwards in order to train the republic after they have gotten closer again to Russia. They also got memories of former glory, which indicates that a lot of Serbians living in the Republic dislike the government and would rather return to the monarchy, and they are really unsure about their current political situation. And the last focus would be, the last idea would be the rule with an iron gauntlet, which indicates that the People's Radical Party has a firm grasp on the parliament and on the opposition, as they have a large majority over all the other parties, and they keep the opposition at bay. For over 30 years now, they have been in power, and it is highly unlikely for any opposition party to gain some traction that would be necessary to overthrow them. And Pašić wants to keep it this way, as he knows that any political change would probably upset the Republic and would probably cause the Republic's demise, as there are radicalists to both ends, both left and right. However, they also got a political mechanic, which also ties in what I just told you about the instability in the opposition. So we got three different aspects we need to keep an eye on. So for example, we got the politicalization of the army, we got the satisfaction of the Serbian trade unions, and we got the influence of political opposition. Each of these aspects influences certain values. For example, if the politicalization of the army is higher, their fighting strength will decrease. However, you will gain political power and stability. Because it's currently only in level 2, they got a small attack bonus and a small debuff on political power and stability. For the trade unions, you will actually gain additional recruitable population if they are satisfied. However, you will then have less construction speed and more consumer goods. The political opposition is always negative, so keeping them as low as possible is your long-term goal. Those decisions down here help you in influencing the different values. So each of them will influence or decrease the different So each of them will influence the values at the top here, and you need to take them strategically in order for you to gain the most of it. Each of them also costs 3% of stability, so it is quite an investment, and you need to plan out your next move, and you need to make compromises between the different factions in order for you to be able to gain the most of the situation. Their focus tree also ties into that mechanic, as several focuses, for example the economic focuses, influence these values, or the introduce austerity measures focus, for example, actually decreases the cost of the Republican affairs decisions, so you only pay 2% instead of 3% stability. And then, of course, following the structure of the other focus trees as well, you got a starting focus tree, which is basically assessing the current situation, trying to deal with your opposition, trying to deal with the current economic situation. Then after the crash you will have a recovery tree, which is necessary to deal with the problems the Republic faces now. You got the expand the NSR, you got the NSR as a paramilitary force that assists you in order to employ as many young people as possible. You got the rely on Serbian strength focus, which also influences the political minigame and has a cool icon. And then you have the war tree down here, which is of course targeted towards not only the Ottomans but also towards northern Serbia, as they are a big threat on your border, because they will backstab you during the war, and you need to keep an eye out for them, as they will otherwise overwhelm you relatively quickly. And now, so you can see, I quickly unlocked the economic recovery section of Southern Serbia, and now you can see that they actually have some additional decisions right here that are able to help you to deal with the economic crisis. If I had the crisis spirit right now, each of these decisions would decrease the negative effects of the crisis, and after I have taken all of them, the spirit would actually disappear. I've also taken the austerity focus, which decreases the cost, as I already told you, to 2%. And that's about it for the mechanics of Southern Serbia. Okay, so now we're back, and now we're in February of 1921. And what has just happened is that several Balkan partisan organizations seized vast territories of former Ottoman control, which was all started by a Thessaloniki protest that then led to public outrage when the Ottoman officials shot on the protesters. This, of course, also inspired other factions, for example, the VMRO that we discussed earlier when talking about Bulgaria, or Serbian rebels that began to start to expel the Ottomans in their Serbian lands. And now the entirety of the Balkan has basically been demilitarized. My army was forced to retreat, and that's basically the situation right before the Balkan War. And some days later we will be presented with this view, with our own custom Balkan War super event, with its own music and its own quote. And as we can see right here, we have been declared war on by several different factions, by several different uprisings from the various ethnicities that are present in the Balkans. So for starters, we got the Greek uprising led by Pavlos Melas, we got a Bulgarian uprising backed by the VMRO led by Todor Poprushov, we got a Serbian uprising right here led by Božin Zimic, and we got a Kosovo uprising right here led by Isa Boletini, and of course we also got a uprising in Albania led by Ismail Kvemali. Crete has been annexed by the Greek uprising, and Montenegro took the opportunity to seize this state right here, and all those uprisings are of course at war with the Ottoman Empire. So after a few days, those Balkan nations will then start to annex their respective uprisings, thus marking the beginning of the First Balkan War, as they then declare war on the Ottoman Empire and actively intervene into the conflict. And now a few days later I am at war with all of the Balkan nations, except for the Serbian uprising, which was not annexed by the Republic, as it has been defeated by Kosovo, but all the other Balkan nations have joined in now, they have annexed their uprisings, and they have declared war on the Ottoman Empire, thus trying to finally expel them from the Balkans. This war is hard to win for the Ottomans, and it will really take some skill, but it is possible. It is still possible to win as the Ottoman Empire. But that's about it for the Balkan War Showcase. I've showed you everything that we have finished so far. This content will be on first release, so you can look forward to it all. We will, however, not release any additional content to those nations, so it will all be focused solely on the First Balkan War. We put all of this together in around 5 weeks, with the icon work, with the coding work. So I hope you liked it, even though it might be a bit rough around the edges at some parts. The link to our Discord is in the description, so make sure to look there if you want to see more of our content, if you want to see what we've been up to. We would be really glad to see you on our server. And until then, I wish you all a wonderful day, and goodbye until we see us the next time.